Truth revealed, this man went from European hero to national punchline. Garry Birtles, once worth over £1 million, ended up unemployed, broken and forgotten. But what really happened to the man who was supposed to be Manchester United's next legend? And how did his career spiral so tragically? This is the story of a working-class hero who conquered Europe twice, only to be destroyed by forces beyond his control. A story of hidden injuries, crushing pressure, and a system that chewed him up and spat him out. By the end, you'll understand why Garry Birtles deserves our respect, not our ridicule. Let's go back to where it all began. Long Eaton, Derbyshire, 1970s. Before Garry Birtles was lifting European trophies, he was on his knees, fitting carpets in council estates. This was Britain in the mid-1970s. Industrial strife, rising unemployment, physical labour. Football was just a hobby. He played for Long Eaton United in the non-league pyramid. Then, in 1976, Nottingham Forest took a chance on him for £2,000, about the price of a used car. No pressure with that price tag. That manager was Brian Clough, and under Clough's guidance, something magical happened. Birtles made his debut as a winger against Hull City in March 1977, but Clough saw something different in him. He converted Birtles to a striker, and that's when everything clicked. At Nottingham Forest, Birtles wasn't drowning in tactics or systems. Clough kept things simple: play with confidence, trust your instincts, don't overthink it. And Birtles thrived. When he scored against Liverpool in the European Cup in 1978, he was playing with pure freedom. He had everything to gain and nothing to lose. He was the unknown quantity, the ultimate underdog story. Then came the glory years. In 1979, Birtles provided the crucial assist for Trevor Francis in the European Cup final. Forest won. 1 year later, he scored in the semi-final against Ajax and played in the final against Hamburg. Forest won again. Back-to-back European Cups. He was voted European Young Player of the Year. But here's the thing. Despite all this success, Birtles still saw himself as just a carpet fitter from a council estate. He was grounded, humble, because what happened next would change everything. October 1980, Manchester United came calling. They were desperate to recapture the glory days of the 1960s. They needed a striker to replace Andy Ritchie and Stuart Pearson. They wanted Garry Birtles. The fee they agreed to pay? £1.25 million. In today's money, that sounds almost quaint. But in 1980, it was astronomical. This was during a deep recession in the UK. Unemployment was soaring towards 3 million. Industries were collapsing. Families were struggling to put food on the table. And here was a footballer being bought for over £1 million. Birtles became Manchester United's record signing. Overnight, everything changed. He wasn't a hard-working local lad anymore. He was a financial asset, a commodity. The media narrative shifted instantly. Every touch of the ball was now calculated against that massive price tag. Every miss was a waste of money. Every game without a goal was a failure. The pressure was suffocating. But the tragedy went deeper than just pressure. Birtles had flourished at Forest in a system designed for him. Brian Clough's Forest played fluid, instinctive counter-attacking football. They had genius wingers like John Robertson creating chances. It was natural, free-flowing, beautiful. Manchester United under Dave Sexton was the complete opposite. Sexton was a technician who believed in rigid systems and methodical play. The football was often dull and predictable. Birtles was expected to be a solitary target man, creating goals out of nothing. He walked into a dressing room that lacked the tight-knit camaraderie of Forest. The squad was ageing and disjointed. He later admitted the shock of it all, saying the team he joined was breaking up, and every new player was expected to win the championship for them. He was isolated on the pitch and increasingly isolated off it. But the worst part? Birtles still saw himself as that carpet fitter from Chilwell. He couldn't reconcile his self-image with being a superstar worth £1.25 million. He later called the move probably one of the worst decisions he'd ever made in his life. Think about that. This man had achieved the pinnacle of his profession, a record transfer to the biggest club in the world, and he immediately knew he'd made a fatal error. He was trapped in a golden cage. expected to perform miracles while battling a profound sense of not belonging. Then came the nightmare, the goal drought. Birtles made his Manchester United debut against Stoke City on October 22, 1980. United won 2-1. He didn't score. Fair enough. It was his first game. Next match, he didn't score. The match after that, no goal. This pattern repeated for 30 consecutive league games in his first season. 30 games. Not a single league goal. He did score once in the FA Cup against Brighton. But in the league? Nothing. Silence. For a striker signed specifically to score goals, this was a professional apocalypse. The drought became a living thing. It followed him everywhere. It dominated the newspapers. It was the topic of conversation in every pub across Manchester. People couldn't believe it. A £1 million striker who couldn't find the net. The mockery was relentless. And it got dark. Really dark. During the Iran hostage crisis, when those hostages were finally released in 1981, a joke started circulating. What was the first question the hostages asked? Has Garry Birtles scored for United yet? The joke was devastating. It framed his failure as a constant of the universe, something so reliable you could measure time by it. Then came an even worse joke. After John Lennon was tragically murdered in December 1980, people started saying if Garry Birtles had shot John Lennon, he'd still be alive today. Let that sink in. They were linking his football struggles to a horrific murder. He wasn't seen as a person anymore. He was a symbol of total incompetence. The jokes were everywhere. The newspapers were merciless. He appeared on lists of worst signings and biggest flops. His name became synonymous with failure. But here's what nobody knew at the time. Here's the truth that changes everything. Birtles was badly injured. He arrived at Old Trafford carrying a stress fracture of the pubic bone, a condition called osteitis pubis. This injury causes severe inflammation and fracture of the pubic area. It creates terrible pain in the groin and pelvis, especially when twisting, turning, or sprinting. You know, the exact movements a striker needs to make. In 1980, sports medicine was primitive. MRI scans weren't routine. Birtles was likely told he had a groin strain and to just play through the pain. He later revealed he couldn't do anything. He wasn't even allowed to drive. All he could do was walk. Yet he played. Week after week, he played. Why? Because he was the £1.25 million man. Because the culture of 1980s football demanded you didn't complain about pain. Because showing weakness meant you were soft. He missed pre-season training because of the transfer and the injury. So he was trying to gain match fitness in the first division while managing what was essentially a broken pelvis. Imagine that. Playing top-level football with broken bones and being mocked for not performing. The stress became unbearable. Birtles revealed he was nearly killed in a car accident during the worst of the drought. The pressure, the anxiety, the mental exhaustion, it all came to a head. He lost concentration while driving. This near miss is a perfect symbol of his time at United. A man careening out of control, dangerously close to total destruction, while the world watched and laughed. Eventually, in the 1981-82 season, he scored his first league goal against Swansea City. The reaction at Old Trafford was unbelievable. The roar sounded like they'd won the European Cup, while the fans meant well. It just highlighted how low expectations had fallen. A single goal was being celebrated like a trophy. It was absurd. By September 1982, Manchester United had seen enough. They sold Birtles back to Nottingham Forest. The fee? £250,000. They'd paid £1.25 million. They sold him for £250,000, a loss of £1 million. It was an unprecedented financial disaster at the time. Birtles returned to the City ground, but he was a different man. The aura of invincibility was gone. He did score 38 goals in his second spell at Forest, which shows he could still play, but eventually he had to move to centre-half, a position change that often signals a striker has lost his explosiveness. His untreated pelvic injury had long-term consequences. His career wound down with spells at Notts County and Grimsby Town. By 1992, he retired. He was only 36. but his body was failing. Years of carpet fitting in his youth, combined with playing through injuries on the heavy muddy pitches of the 1980s, had destroyed his spine. He developed arthritis in his lower back. He left professional football physically compromised, entering a world that had little use for ex-footballers. And then came the hardest part, being unemployed. Birtles retired in 1992. Right in the middle of a severe economic recession in the UK. Unlike modern Premier League players who retire as millionaires, Birtles belonged to a generation that earned good wages but not life-changing wealth. He later stated he came out of football with the recession on in a big way when lots of players finishing had no jobs to go to. The transition was terrifying. No structure, no income, no clear path forward. So what did a double European Cup winner do? He went into the seafood business. He partnered with a contact from Grimsby and started selling seafood. Think about that image for a moment. A man who had lifted the European Cup twice was now selling fish to make ends meet. It wasn't glamorous. It was survival. The lack of institutional support for retired players was shocking. Birtles had to hustle just to put food on the table. All the glory had been stripped away. Eventually, things improved. He found a way back into football through media work, becoming a columnist for the Nottingham Evening Post and a pundit for Sky Sports. But this stability was hard-won, built on years of anxiety and struggle. Just when life seemed to be settling down, just when Birtles had finally found peace, tragedy struck again. Around 2019, his wife Samantha fell ill. The diagnosis was pancreatic cancer, one of the most aggressive and deadly forms of cancer. Birtles described the moment with heartbreaking honesty. She received the prognosis. Bang! Your world collapses in an instant. Samantha was 54 years old. The prognosis was terminal. She was given only months to live, expected to survive, until March 2020. Birtles, who had spent his life being the centre of attention as a striker, a record signing, a pundit, immediately stepped away from the spotlight. He became Samantha's full-time carer, looking after her 24 hours a day. This happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. The isolation was total. The football family that usually gathered for support couldn't meet in person. Birtles was locked down with his dying wife, watching the person he loved most fade away day by day. He spoke about how the football community rallied around him. His phone rang constantly. Former teammates like John Robertson, Frank Clark, and Colin Barrett checked in regularly. He said, "You don't really know the football family is there until you need it. It lifts you. It makes you realise the love is out there." The camaraderie he'd missed in the Manchester United dressing room finally returned to him in his darkest hour. Samantha defied the initial prognosis but passed away in June 2021. Her death sparked a massive outpouring of grief and support from the football community. A charity match was organised at Basford United called the Samantha Birtles Trophy. The teams were Garry Birtles Superstars versus Harewood and Turner Treetops Legends. The managers? Nigel Clough, son of Brian, and Kevin Keegan. The cause was Treetops Hospice, the facility that had cared for Samantha. Legends like Viv Anderson, Tony Woodcock, and Kevin Keegan all turned out to support Birtles. The man who had been the national punchline in 1980 was revealed to be a figure of immense respect and affection within the game. It was a poignant moment. After all the mockery, all the jokes, all the cruelty, the football world finally showed Garry Birtles the love he always deserved. So what's the real story of Garry Birtles? It's not a simple tale of a football flop. It's a complex story about the human cost of sport. Birtles was a victim of terrible timing. He rose during the harsh 1970s. He transferred during the economic crisis of the 1980s. He retired during the recession of the 1990s. And he suffered devastating personal loss during the pandemic of the 2020s. He was a man constantly battered by the winds of change. The physical cost was enormous. The carpet fitter's knees and the striker's fractured pelvis led to lifelong arthritis and pain, a sacrifice made for a game that offered little financial security. The psychological cost was just as brutal. Going from anonymous worker to million-pound commodity created a paralysis of performance and deep imposter syndrome during his best years. The social cost was cruel. He endured public humiliation on a national scale, becoming the butt of jokes about terrorists and murderers. That kind of cruelty would be seen as unacceptable bullying today, and the emotional cost? Losing his wife, Samantha, stripped him of his companion in later life, forcing him to confront mortality not on a pitch, but in a hospice. Yet, through all of this, Birtles never crumbled. He rebuilt his life after carpet fitting. He rebuilt his career after Manchester United. He rebuilt his finances after the seafood business. And he's rebuilding his spirit after losing Samantha. That's the real story. Not failure. Resilience. Garry Birtles didn't flop. He fought through pain, poverty, and grief, and he survived. He deserves our respect, not our ridicule. He's a testament to the endurance of the working-class spirit that defined his generation. A reminder that behind every statistic, every transfer fee, every goal drought, there's a human being. And sometimes that human being is carrying burdens we can't even imagine.